Hello and welcome back to Bookish and welcome to my latest video. These are 11 classic works that I have no intention of reading, that I refuse to read, and I dare you to change my mind. Number one on my list is the Iliad by Homer. I've read the Odyssey, had to read it in college. I have a copy of the Iliad and I've thought about reading it, but to be honest with you, I feel like these are stories, the basic concept of the story that I've heard before. I realize that reading the novel reading the work may, give me some insights, didn't have, introduced themes and topics I didn't, know were there. But to be honest with you, it just doesn't hold that much interest for me now. And so, for that reason, I refuse to read the Iliad. Number two on the list is one I feel a little bad about. Bad about in the sense that I feel like there should probably be some kind of obligation given my past profession, but that is I don't want to read and I refuse to read the Histories by Herodotus. I have a copy, it's right up there somewhere, and I had intended to read it at one time, but to be honest with you, I read the first few pages and it was just, I just have this issue with reading works written by ancient authors. I don't know, for some reason I fail to connect. They seem, I don't know, strange to me somehow, and certainly that was true with Herodotus. Along those same lines, I have no interest in reading the Republic, or really, I could have put almost any work of Greek or Roman philosophy, if we want to call them those things, from the past. I'm aware of Plato's ideas. I had to read a little bit of Plato when I was in college, just little bits and become aware of his ideas, but I don't really have any interest in reading that. That's just not something on my list. I know as a history person, I probably should have already read Herodotus and Plato, but I just haven't, and at this point in my life, 55, I pretty much refuse to try to take those on. As I do with the number 4 book on my list, and that is The Tale of Genji, or Genji, by Murasaki Shikibu. This is, I believe, a Japanese a work from like the 11th or the 10th century, and it's really long, and I've seen a few people on BookTube who've read it, and I'll be honest with you, their reaction to the book has kind of convinced me that this would be a book I never read, a book I should refuse to read. Number one, it's really long, and by the way, you're going to see a theme pop up here in the books that I'm putting on my list. Number one, it's really long, and second, I think that the impression I got from other people's videos about it is that it's confusing, and I just am not sure the people I've seen read the book and talk about it on BookTube feel like the effort was worth what they got from it. So right now I am refusing, or I am saying clearly I refuse to read Tales of Genji or Genji. There are some of the books on my list that I have attempted to read or maybe read part of, and we're kind of getting into that area right now. I refuse to read the Canterbury Tales. I've given this a good faith effort more than once. At one point, I'd actually planned to read the Canterbury Tales as part of this project I had to read a whole Norton's anthology of English literature. And I got, I think, to the Prior's Tale. Maybe that's it. I can't remember. And I just ran out of steam. And I came to the conclusion that in that case, the juice, what I was getting from it, wasn't quite worth the effort of the squeeze. That it was, that effort was really, to me, not worth going on. I feel like I have an idea of some of the, of Chaucer's tales and Canterbury Tales that are most well known, an appreciation for kind of the relationship between, what is that, Middle English, Old English, and modern day English. And I think that's enough. So I refuse to continue trying to read the Canterbury Tales. I saw somebody recently talk about the number 6 book on my list, and that is the Decameron by Boccacio. This is, I believe, the framing story of this, I believe, is a group of young people leave an Italian city to go to a villa up in the hills, and they decide to entertain one another by telling stories. And I want to say there are 10 of them, and each of them has to tell 10 stories. And I understand the historical significance of the Decameron, and I understand that there probably are some stories in there that are delightful. The person I saw talking about it seemed to indicate that they really enjoyed it. But I just know this is a book I'm not going to enjoy. I know it's a book which I put in this category, books I refuse to read, for a reason. On top of that, even though I've never actually held a copy in my hand, it sounds pretty long. Continuing on at number 7, the number 7 book on my list that I refuse to read is, again, one of those books I refuse to continue trying to read, and that's The Divine Comedy by Dante. I read the Inferno when I was in college. And I had an intention at one point in my life to, you know, read Purgatorio and Paradiso, and I never picked it up, and I have almost no motivation to do so. Despite Tom and L.A. Books' excellent series, I'm sure, in which he reads, Dante reads the entire Divine Comedy in a series of videos, I never felt like that was something I want to do. And if I'm not going to do it with, read it along with Tom and L.A. Books, I know I'm never going to get to it. So I'm just going to say right now, I refuse to read the rest of Dante. And number 8 on the book is on my list is the only book on this list which I myself think I might change my mind, but for right now I'm going to say I refuse to read this book, and that's Don Quixote by Cervantes. You know, maybe the first novel, certainly pivotal, foundational in the history of Western literature, the great Spanish epic, and I know several people on BookTube who I know and respect, who've read it and think it's great. My problem is that I think I might enjoy the first half, but that second half would really, my understanding is the second half is a little bit less entertaining and a little bit denser, and I just know that I would quit and give up probably during that point, and so I'm just not going to attempt it. I'm going to refuse to read Don Quixote. Number 9 on my list is probably the easiest book I put on my list, and it's so easy a book I put on my list that it probably doesn't, you know, belong in the same category as these others, and that is The Mill and the Floss by George Eliot. I've read one George Eliot book, and that was Adam Bede, and I thought it was okay, but I didn't think it was so great that I should go on and read Eliot's great book, Middlemarch. So if there is a really long George Eliot book I'm going to get to, it would be Middlemarch, and certainly not The Mill and the Floss. And I can't imagine Middlemarch being so good that I want to subject myself to a book which even I think George Eliot fans think of as being kind of boring. So The Mill and the Floss is probably the easiest choice on here, and if you're trying to convince me to read it, this is probably the one you're going to have the hardest time convincing me to read. And number 10 is Les Miserables by Victor Hugo. I refuse to read this 1,000+ page doorstop, which seems odd. You know, I am a huge fan of 19th century French literature. I like the 2 Flaubert novels I've read. I really love Balzac. I love the Zola novel I've read, and I intend to read more Zola. And I read The Hunchback of Notre Dame, which I thought was okay, but this story of Les Mis is one that I've known. I saw one of my daughter's birthdays. We went to the movie musical version of Les Mis, and I remember after the Anne Hathaway character dies, I'm sorry I don't remember her name, and sings that great song. From that point on, it was a steady downhill for me, and I remember at the end of the book, despite understanding how great a character, person Jean Valjean actually is, I was so happy when he finally died so the movie could be over and I could go home. I don't think that bodes well for my reading of Les Mis, and so I'm just going to say I refuse to read Les Mis. And then at number 11, I put War and Peace by Leo Tolstoy. I have a copy of War and Peace. I know there's an ongoing group on BookTube who's reading War and Peace together, and I thought briefly about joining in on that, and then again I looked at the size of the book. I remember my experience reading Anna Karenina, which I liked for the most part, and then I saw somebody who had finished the book say, you know, that they liked it, but there were several hundred pages that they didn't think they didn't enjoy very much. They didn't think were very good or were necessary, and I thought to myself, I'm not going to read 250, 300 pages of a 1,000+ page novel that somebody else acknowledges aren't very good or seem unnecessary or seems overly long or involved. Just to say I've read War and Peace. I think I'll live without it, so I refuse to read War and Peace as well. So, please, in the comments section below, if you feel like it, either do your best to convince me I'm wrong, to change my mind so that I will read one of these classic novels, or maybe all of these classic novels, or if you agree with me, I appreciate the support in my refusal to read these classic novels. So, like I said, look forward to your comments in the comment section below, and as always, thank you for watching.